Just when we needed it, a tender mercy came our way in the form of a young family on their way to a family reunion out in Utah, and they're sharing their ancestors' Mormon Battalion journal with us.
All right. Well, I thought I would start off by reading the first entry from the journal of Henry Standage. This would be July 19th, 1846. Sabbath. Today I attended meeting at Council Bluffs, preaching by Elder Parley P. Pratt, when much was said on the necessity of our obedience to the call of the President to enlist in the service of the U.S. for 1 year, and on finding the 5th Company yet needing some men. I felt willing to leave my friends and enlist according to counsel, though at this time my wife was without house or tent and with but little provisions, $3 in money, 1 cow, and property belonging to Joseph Pierce to take care of.
Today, we're very lucky that we get to have Tiffany McLaws with us from Iowa. She came into our life on the trek at a very critical moment, as many of you will have heard in the interview that I did with Peter. We had had a crazy, crazy day and had come home to nothing but trailer problems. And so when she and her husband came and found us, it totally turned around my attitude, and it just gave us all a lift that we really needed. So Tiffany, thank you so much for making time to chat today.
Sure, you're welcome. Happy to be here.
You may not know what we were going through when you showed up, but let's first of all back up and say, how did you even hear of Battalion Trek way back when?
I am trying to remember how that even came into play. It would have been about 5 years prior. It was December of 2003 when my husband's mother passed away. And cleaning out the house, we found a printed, bound copy of Henry Standage's journal, an account of his experiences in the Mormon Battalion. And so that was one of the things that we had brought home with the intent of making copies to share with the rest of my husband's siblings. So these connections are in my mind. Our daughter was born the year that they did the wagon train reenactments, and she was just a wee little 3-week-old, and we went out to Utah, and I had wanted so badly to be a part of that wagon train, but my husband said, absolutely not, you're pregnant. That's no place for a pregnant woman to be. And I was so heartbroken. But I had sewed my daughter I was making her 2 dresses, a white one to be blessed in, and then one that looked more like what I thought Pioneer
Oh, how fun.
baby would wear. And so she was kind of like my celebration, I guess, for that year. So I think that kind of just that experience. And I mean, we did make it out to Utah for the 24th of July parade and the big celebration they had in BYU's stadium. So I think that just kind of instilled a desire in me to, or have that on my radar, I guess, of, the Mormon Battalion reenactment. My husband and I originally from Utah, but came out here to Iowa for medical school. And during the first couple of years, I don't even know what year it would have been, they did a mustering of the Mormon Battalion that I was able to ride along with some fellow ward members too. And at that time, I just had our first 2 little boys. So it would have been prior to 1997.
So you've dabbled in church history, and you've even found that journal. That must have been quite the find.
Yeah, it's very fun to go back. I was kind of reading through this morning a little bit to refresh my memory of some of the experiences.
Well, I remember that was really sweet to have you come and sit in our trailer on the couch and read us from your ancestors' journal. So that is a very tender memory for me, to know that you were busy, you were traveling out west, but you made time to try to find us.
I'm trying to think if we had cell phones. I'm sure we had cell phones, but not the same technology that we do today. And how we even found you, I really don't remember how I came to know that you guys would be on the trail and where to even find you. But I think after having this journal and just the stirrings of my heart, I love hearing stories of pioneers, and to have an actual journal of somebody that went through that. And I was just like, we have to go find these people and meet them. I think I was probably very adamant to my husband, like, we need to do this on our journey. It's not going to take but, an hour or two out of our way. And
just so you know, it was truly a miracle to have you show up when you did. We had been dealing with nothing but trailer problems for 2 weeks, and we were finally on our first day out of Council Bluffs and thought we had everything ironed out. And when we got back to the campground, their trailer was flooded, and friend Allison called us and said, Denny, there's a couple here that they want to talk to you. And I says, I couldn't even imagine who that might be. Because who knew me in Iowa? Glenwood, Iowa.
some strange people.
Yeah. So he said, well, they've got a journal and they want to read it to you. And I was like, okay, I'll be there as soon as I can. So I just dropped everything and ran back to the trailer, and there you were with your kids in your journal. So it really was, after we'd been through all that, and I shared this in the interview that I had with the fellow who walked with us that day, it completely readjusted my attitude and my heart, because we were all pretty much discouraged when we got back to camp and had that mess on our hands. But having you come and having your enthusiasm and your love for your ancestor and going to the extra effort to try to find us, it brought us back to the place where we needed to remember, okay, yeah, we're doing this because these people dedicated their lives to, the service that they felt was important with the Mormon Battalion, and now their ancestors are carrying on that dedication and that excitement. And so, yeah, we're supposed to be out here on this trail, and yes, we will get up tomorrow and we will go.
Oh, that's so neat. I had no idea at the time that would have been so meaningful for you. Growing up in the heart of downtown Salt Lake, I would hear stories of people, or not people, youth, getting to go on handcart trek reenactments. And I was always so jealous. I'm like, how come we can't get to experience that? And so I think that, I've always had that desire in my heart. Since with my children growing up, I have been able to participate in one. So yay.
Oh, good.
Experience that a little bit. So I think I've just always kind of had a long, I don't know if you'd call it a longing or just intrigue with Mormon pioneers and handcart pioneers. And so I think I just really admired that somebody was willing to make that trek and honor ancestors and people that sacrificed a lot.
Well, I'll have to ask you the same question I've asked everyone. What did you think? What were your first reactions or thoughts when you heard that someone was going to try to hike the Mormon Battalion Trail all the way?
Well, part of me was like, I want to do that. But then reality is like, that would take a long time and I'm probably not physically fit. And that would be a big sacrifice, especially for me in my stage of life. I had little children, so there was like, yeah, no way. But even just to experience it for a day, I think maybe that's kind of what I was hoping to feel.
Yep, there's a difference when you're actually there on location where they were. It's very interesting what that does to your heart and your mind. There truly does seem to be a connection there between those who have gone before and us. Like, and listen to us today talking about, I don't know if I remember. Did we have cell phones back then? People are going to think we're pioneers. We're so old. Oh, that's funny.
We love to tell our kids, stories way back when we didn't have cell phones. Yeah.
Well, I'm very grateful that we have them today so that you and I could reconnect and chat a little bit about that day and that memory. Do you have anything else that came to mind that you'd like to share?
Well, I do remember, and maybe you can refresh my memory. You said a young girl, Allison? Is that what you said her name was?
Uh-huh.
Was she like writing a paper on women's clothing, like the fashions, kind of what they wore in that time period, or was it specific to the Mormon Battalion?
She was doing gathering information to do a dissertation on sharing history in a very interactive, hands-on way. So she was learning about the women, of course, and what they did, but she was also interviewing a lot of the reenactors that we engaged with along the trail. So she ended up getting her dissertation.
Nice.
It was interesting. She said that she found out that Kevin and I were not always telling what really happened in his blog. Yeah. So there you
Yeah,
go. You
that
all have
is,
that little bit of information. You didn't get the real scoop.
I mean, that is kind of interesting because when you read somebody's journal, you're getting their perspective of things. And, you know, I mean, as I've read through just kind of the first few pages here of our ancestors' journal, some days are really basic, like rain today till noon. Then the first four companies their line of march and the fifth tarried at the Bluffs. Sometimes you get just very, not very detailed.
Pretty
um,
generalized, huh?
yeah, just kind of some basic, this is what we did. And then other entries, are a lot more detailed and talking about a little bit of emotions and, like what the person thought about the situation. And so
And
I
that's
find
when you
it
really
very
start to feel
interesting.
close to them, I think.
July 20th. This morning, I arose early to prepare to join my company, which was 10 miles distant on the Missouri River. Went with Brother Eldridge and besought him to permit my mother to make it her home with him till I could be free to take care of her. When he agreed to be a son to my mother, and I accordingly her with him, promising to recompense him as soon as I was able and opportunity would offer. About 9 o'clock, I took my knapsack and left the camp of Israel, leaving my wife and mother in tears, and reached the company at noon. This afternoon, I received a blanket of government and commenced to draw rations also.
When you
Yeah.
then try to empathize, oh, this was not all. When you interviewed someone and they said, well, oh, Allison said, there were a lot of them that weren't really happy about being there, but that's what they had committed to do. So they were doing it. And we had days like that too, where, the fun was not there, but we had committed. So we were onward and upward.
Yeah. What a commitment.
Well, we are all committed, right, in life. There's no turning back.
That's true. That's true.
That's for me. That's why I love to read about my ancestors. Is I'm like, oh my gosh, they had to overcome that. They had to deal with that problem. Oh well, if they can do it, I can do it. And that was one of the things that I learned. One of the first three women that went into Salt Lake was my great great grandpa's sister. I was like, you know what? That's pretty cool. She must have been a tough cookie to do that, and I can do it too. So I think it really helps us to be able to know a little bit about our people that came before us.
Yeah. As a little girl growing up, I remember my mother going off to meetings. What would she call it? DUP.
Oh
And I'm
yeah,
like, what's that? And, then I found out Daughters of Utah Pioneers. And I'm like, oh, I'm a daughter of a pioneer. Like it was a revelation to me that I was like, I didn't know this. And I kind of like wished, well, why isn't my mom taking me to these meetings? If she's a daughter, then I'm a daughter too. And even as she moved to St. George later, she continued to attend those meetings. And so I kind of felt left out a little bit. And she has since passed, so I don't even know what they did at those meetings or
you know what?
how
That's
it
so interesting that you would say that because that jogs my memory. Emma going to those meetings fully, and I even got an application to sign up to be part of that organization, and I don't think I ever sent it in. So you and I need to sign up. We need to join
yes.
the DUP, although it's not the DUP anymore. It's the International Daughters of the Mormon Pioneers. They are worldwide, so which is
Oh,
cool
that's
because
neat.
so many people came from other countries to Utah. I don't know a lot about them. I just know that they've got a different name. Well,
Yeah.
they've added to their name anyway.
I was listening to your um, latest podcast about why you chose to go on this trek, and you said it helped you realize how the women relied on each other and how that women connection was very important.
It was a totally different situation for me when we had other women walking. It was a pretty male dominant event. Kevin
Yeah.
and my dad, and usually I was driving back up, but every once in a while, there was one day in particular in Kansas, and I wish I was like Kevin. He can remember geographic places better than I can, but we were walking with this ward. Basically, they had planned the day. They had the women, they had the Boy Scouts, the Cub Scouts, and we were walking along. And I told Kevin, I really want to walk today because there's going to be women there. I don't want to just drive the truck. And so it turned out that I got to walk because of the way things were set up. And my journal entry for that day was like, okay, now I know what women talked about on the trail. Because it was just, I had such a good time. I learned two things. I learned that it was much more convenient to be wearing a dress, a pioneer dress, when you need to go to the bathroom than to be wearing Levi's. Those women had a tough time, and I had no problem. And the other thing I learned was that women need women. Just being around them lifted my spirits so much. And I felt like I was rejuvenated. Actually, that was one of the big takeaways for me from our trip, was the incredible women that I met. I expected to come to appreciate and understand a little bit better the pioneer women, but really what happened is I just came away just incredulous at the women that I met in modern days. You were one of them.
Oh, thank you. I mean, as I hear stories of, the pioneer women, and I revere them and look up to them so much, I hope that I am as strong in my, being a pioneer in my day as they were. I hope I can have the same courage and fortitude and strength to carry on through my trials, which seem, silly maybe compared to the trials of Pioneer Day. But, I think each generation has their own trials that equate.
I don't think they would have thought of themselves as these amazing women. They just were doing what they had to do every day. And we look back and say, oh my gosh, how did they do that? But our kids will say, oh my gosh, how did they do that? They didn't have cell phones? It's all different, I guess, when you look back.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for visiting with me. It's been fun to reconnect.
You're welcome. Journal entry, September 17th, from Henry Standage. Quite early this morning, we buried Brother Phelps of Company E with but little ceremonies. Just as we were about to leave the Arkansas, Brothers Lee Egan and Lieutenant Pace arrived with letters from the 12 and counsel for the battalion, also many letters for the brethren from their family or from their friends. They came to receive money from the soldiers to take to their families. I don't know what this abbreviation would DJ and then a G on the General Dykes would not listen to Brother Lee, the messenger of the 12, and said there was no time to counsel now. Brother Lee objected to our going any other course but that the 12 and Colonel Allen had marked out. He opposed the separating of the families from the battalion and felt hurt at the same. The star last night that was seen moving was an omen of the arrival of the messengers, inasmuch as the officers were consent to almost anything that Lieutenant Smith, our tyrant, would propose. But we still call upon the Lord to protect us. We traveled 25 miles this day across the most dreary deserts that ever man saw, suffering much from the intense heat of the sun and for want of water. The grass not more than 2 inches high and as curly as the wool on a Negro's head. The teams also suffered much from the sand. I drank some water today that the buffaloes had wallowed in and could not be compared to anything else but buffalo urine, as a great portion of it was of the same. Yet we were glad to get this. Saw many buffaloes today and many wounded by the battalion, some killed. Camped without water in this desert and not a blade of grass for our mules. So I thought they really portrayed the hardships that they had to endure. He used great description in how desolate the desert must have been after having left maybe the lush green rolling hills of Council Bluffs. And maybe he was wondering, what am I doing here drinking not pure clean water?
Yeah, exactly. When you listen to that, it makes me feel like a whiner. What I was dealing with when you came to our camp was a broken water pipe. So I didn't have much to complain about, did I?
Oh, well, it's definitely when we our ancestors and their journals, we definitely puts our issues in perspective.